Going on to the second topic now, which is sort of building on what we just spoke about, that preparation within our audience in terms of our client base, but also our staff and the users of the technology, humanizing digital engagement. It's a very important topic. How do we ensure we don't lose the human touch? We explore how digital information can be balanced with empathy. We will look at emotional intelligence, meaningful connection, how to design trust and warmth into a system. I want to give a quick anecdotal sort of thing here. The other day I needed to get a visa. We've got a big event in Uganda that covers doing their marketing and stuff for them. And I had to get a visa, and I went on, I checked I Googled Uganda visa, sites came up. There was a site called uganda.immigration.org. I took that site, I opened, there was the logo of government of Uganda, there was the flag, it said Uganda e-visa portal. Anyway, long story short, I went through that. At the end of the day, I paid 3 times what I should have paid, and I realized that I was actually on the site of a travel agent. And I had actually just contracted with a travel agent to get me a visa instead of going direct, which I could have done. My first thought wasn't the money and that I spent 3 times. My first thought was, how do I now sort this out? I can't speak to anybody because there's a tech platform and that's it. There's nothing else. And I immediately started worrying, and I had lost trust in this process, and that and I had to sit and wait until at some point 2 days later, I got a message back from the site that said they've received my application. And I knew, okay, at least that tech site is talking to me. And just the thought that I wouldn't be able to reach a human was a massive challenge for me. So this is what we're going to be looking at now, to see how do we get away from the transactional to a relational environment using tech. So we've got a couple of guys here that are perfectly suited. We've got Mark Baker, the CEO of MyGrow. He founded MyGrow, and it's a tech-enabled EQ platform. And you can actually Google it and go and look at it afterwards. It's really amazing. We've got Graham Harvey. He's the CEO of Cardinal Group, Cardinal Insurance Management Systems. And Graham is the co-founder and the CEO of the group. And the group is a collective of insurtech companies. He's got 23 years experience, so it's hard tech. That's what Graham is all about. And then we've got Wimpie. Wimpie is sort of almost in between a combination of Mark and Graham. Known Wimpie for a very long time. He's very interested, and he does a lot of work in the space of empathy in our environment. But Wimpie is an architect. He's also a really good artist. I know because I've seen some of Wimpie's artwork. And yeah, he's the founder and the directing force behind Global Choices Assets. And they do the lifestyle, I think you guys would know, and 24-hour emergency solutions. But he's also got a venture company called Digital Path, which provides, sort of assists clients on their digital innovations, etc. And Claims Central Africa, which enhances delivery in the claims management space, so very well suited to chat to us about that. So without further ado, Graham, if you don't mind me starting off with you, giving us a little bit of a tech feel for where we are at in terms of humanizing digital engagement.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be part of this panel. And well done, Graham. That was a lovely presentation. I think obviously tech is the latest buzzword, and every business is a technology business. And by the way, what do? If you have the best avocado trees and the best avocado product, it's because you have the best technology, it seems. So it's quite ferocious how fast, technology is moving. I think where it's really important to stop and take a look at how it affects our industry. We need to obviously look at it and realize that the moments that the clients, really remember are the ones that aren't the routine moments. So, it's how easy is it to onboard a client, after an incident like a robbery or an accident. How is the situation handled at that particular point? And I think that's very important, is to first understand where can technology play a role here, and where is it interacting with the human element of what we do, which is very much a relationship game, and a very strong relationship game in the insurance game. And I think it's in these moments that your speed and your efficiency are extremely important, but they're not enough. What people really want is support. They want reassurance. They want a sense that someone is in their corner, and that it'll be taken care of at the end of the day. So the ease of the processes and the simplicity and responsiveness of the technology can be used, to help ease that emotional burden, or it can actually add to it. Let's not forget that technology, if not implemented and executed properly, can actually really add to a situation in a negative role. In my role, and the various companies that we're involved with from a technology perspective, we've seen firsthand how technology can really transform efficiencies across underwriting, claims, customer service. But we've also noticed and seen that the most loyal customers are those that actually feel listened to, understood, truly supported. That's why I believe technology will never replace human engagement. I really believe that having that human touch, it's all about efficiencies and everything, obviously, to make you cost effective on the back end. But that human element is incredibly important, and the technology is there as a tool to do the heavy lifting, to support, and also, but to more importantly, enhance the human capability of the relationship part. Not have the human element doing a lot of mundane, boring back office work that can be automated through digital transformation or through AI. It's really important to make sure that the human element is enhanced and the technology is enabling it more so. So using the technology alongside people, creating space and time for more empathy, more problem solving, more personalized and specialist service is where I really, see the technology going. I do think that there's a lot of buzzwords. You mentioned insure-tech disruption, and then those insure-techs were going to crush the insurance industry, or majorly change it. And that didn't really happen. They ended up enabling it. And I think that's where a lot of these technologies, because of the deep domain knowledge of what we do in insurance, that's our secret sauce. A lot of that cannot just be disrupted by insurance technology. So we can take some positives around the fact that this AI scary thing that's coming is not necessarily here to decimate jobs. There is a very deep domain knowledge of what we do that needs to be combined with these technologies to really create the secret sauce, or your unique selling proposition. And I think people need to understand that and embrace what is their specialist knowledge in the space, their deep domain knowledge, and that they must be focused on, while being supported by those powerful technologies that can assist them, not disrupt them. So I think, from a client and policyholder perspective, at the end of the day, choice is essential. Clients want convenience. People don't want to leave where they are in their whatever ecosystem they're operating in, and then go fire up the separate thing called an email and download documents and attach them. And those days are fast disappearing. I see email disappearing in 3 to 5 years. I know it's a brave statement to make, but we didn't think fax would leave not too long ago either. So I really do think that people are working inside ecosystems, and we are moving into a space where your tech needs to be part of that ecosystem. And if it's not your technology, then it's a best of breed party that's joining your ecosystem to enable the whole cycle, whether it be underwriting, claims, or servicing your client, or ticking the regulatory box. So it's really, really important to understand that. that building out an ecosystem of tech, not I've got my standalone system of record on its own, that needs to be plugged into the rest of the world, that the client's plugged into, and that obviously best of breeds that are also servicing that client or assisting you to service that client are also plugged into that ecosystem. So I think, clients want to be able to choose the digital route that they would like to go, but then they want to just as easily switch to human engagement should the frustration levels get too high. There is no silver bullet on how you're going to service all the clients. Some are going to be wanted to be serviced in a totally different manner, but they must be able to move to that human engagement if they have any frustration along the way, and without having to recapture data or having to start over, which is what we call an omni-channel experience. And then we also need to acknowledge, lastly, the limits of technology. AI, for example, is everywhere at the moment. It's the latest buzzword. It was, blockchain. It was, all these different times. I'm sure you can remember these things came up and they were seriously going to, shake our worlds. And they've slowly settled and they've found their place, and everyone's using them for where they need to be used. And AI is at that point now where it's show me the money. In other words, what are you going to do that's so incredibly unique? And it's going to assist hugely if used in the right way. And I do believe it's going to be used to recognize patterns, interpret data, but it can't truly detect human nuances like sarcasm and across corridor talk, and snarky comments or opportunities to pick up on new opportunities through that human engagement. So that human interaction is still so important to bring that understanding and connection. So when technology and people obviously work together, that's when we're going to build the trust that will last a long time in what is very much a strong relationship game. So the technology supporting the human element brings that secret sauce from my perspective, and obviously that connected ecosystem. There's so many different parties when we service a client in our industry, or businesses, or best of breeds that are ultimately touching that client, and how easily we can be integrated with this ecosystem, a tech ecosystem where we're not double capturing between different platforms and different systems. The more we can get rid of that and increase the efficiencies, the more we can go towards a more seamless experience for our client at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Graham, thank you very much for those comments. I think spot on, setting the scene for Wimpie. As you mentioned, these ecosystems, etc. I think Wimpie is perfectly positioned because with something like Global Choices, your 24 assist a product, Wimpie, that moment when the client actually presses the button is crucial, and the emotions mostly would be quite high when that sort of thing, that 24-hour emergency solution is needed. So Wimpie, maybe if you can give us a little bit your thoughts on the sort of human side of our engagement.
No, thank you, Tony, and thank you for inviting me to be on your panel. I started Global Choices 24 years ago, and by default, I ended up with a 24-hour assistance services call center. And the whole time, I always apply design thinking because of my conditioning, etc. So in those days, assistance services was just a nice to have access, but it now becomes so embedded into the whole insurance experience. When we get that phone call or that panic button or that WhatsApp channel request for assistance services, you have to go and look back, just like an architect, where everything fits in when you design a building. And it's not just sorting out that emergency case, but is to have a view of that client, and that's where technology play a vital role. What vehicle it is, what is the mandates, the protocols, where that vehicle must go after an accident, or a geyser that burst, etc. What is all the things that needs to fit into that moment? And that's where technology play a vital role. But the human connection and the foundation of design thinking is empathy. And I've now built on to that whole thing as empathy as an acronym. So I've created in our company empathy acronym for all the different divisions as a blueprint to build stronger client relationships, of which technology plays a role. So the E is for engagement. So as when a client comes in, do we know who's the client? The verification of that client, how quickly can we resolve it, and what they're covered for? And it's almost where technology and, Graham pointed out is that is access to that data at that moment of truth, because that emergency phone call is actually a moment of truth for insurance. 90% of all the emergency calls we get is actually the beginning of an insurance claim. So you need to think how the information you capture at that moment of truth and sorting out the client's emergency and that and the support that you're going to provide around that emergency. How can you help the journey, the customer journey along the way? And again, technology, and then activate all the different players that's going to play a role in that claims journey. So that we refer it to as a total experience strategy. So you start with the customer, but you need to give the right tools and the training to the employees that's going to service this client. And then, Graham is very much also embedded, just like me, and for years in the insurance industry. How long have you been going, Graham? But it's going through that.
About 26 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. We're now 24 years. So this is that, from observing where the silo has been built over time and the 300 years of insurance, this is to how you can combine that. Because at the end of the day, insurance is focused around the individual. Their needs, their protection, their risk, and their anxieties, and also insurance is to provide support for their dreams and their responsibilities that they have to look after. So if you actually combine all these things in that total experience, the user experience must be a great experience on technology or in the person and in the call center, access to the technology, the information, the data. So that's where I apply design thinking. So as I said, that engagement, you must give a client the choice of how he's going to engage with you, but it's also this, you're there for your client. And when like the younger generation talk about digital trust, when they phone that number, they know that they're going to be sorted out. So then the M in empathy acronym is for mindfulness. That means to be present for that client, not just a number behind a policy. It's actually an individual behind the policy, and how you can actually resolve their queries, their issues, or their emergency in our case. And then the P is for personalized solutions. But behind that P is also being patient, because everybody's got different approaches and perspective and ideas. And patients provide you with perspective of clients. But personalization, and that's, everybody used that buzzword, but it's actually to know your client. And everybody in the insurance industry needs to take, a broker. It's not just issuing a policy or write a policy for a client, and it's not just a number with the insurer. There's quite a lot of value behind that, and I do believe in the next 10 to 15 years, that's where, with empathy, the most advanced part of empathy or is intuitiveness, and that's where technology will play a role, because you will build this virtual personalization view of a client, because you build up this central view, a customer view of that client over time. And then A is for acknowledgement. One of the biggest things, and I've still found it fascinating, where clients receive a blank claim form. And then today age, where we're now rediscovering the moon and we want to go to Mars, we still send a PDF blank claim form for a client. That's the worst customer experience you can actually expose your clients to. And I know Graham is working very hard on that to change that, but it's a vehicle collaborative type of approach that we need to push forward. The day when you sign up a client, your broker or insurer, direct, is also capture that information that's going to be vital in a risk event that might happen to your client. Not hope it's not going to happen, because that's why you sell insurance for. Those events will happen to a client, and you've got all these very bright actuaries that will work out that the percentages of those events happen with that specific clients. And again, this link with personalization. So all these things are like connecting the dots. And then, insurance is built on trust. And I always like to use it. It's like the mortar that's holding the building together. Trust, when I take out the insurance policy, I want to know that I'm covered for all the vital risk events that's going to happen or might happen in my life. Then to find out at the moment of truth that I'm not covered for something. And that's, again, where a broker needs to listen to their clients, understand their needs, and also think a little bit forward about the need changes over time, because we all go through different life cycles as individuals. So it comes back again to that customer, that individual that you're actually selling a product for. And that's where the humanity part comes in. And then talking about the H is for humanity. Insurance is about people. Every policy is a person with fears, and as I mentioned earlier, dreams. And this for the insurance company need to show that compassion and care when they interact with that client. It's not just a number on the other side of a telephone, a self-service portal, a WhatsApp channel, or a app, or whatever medium they deal with. And as Graham also mentioned, all those channels that you create must all be linked and have that single customer view through that journey. It's not to start over again. The olden days when we did the assistance services, a client, the geyser burst over a weekend, normally on a Sunday night before the kids need to go to the bath, and it's around 5 o'clock, and then the geyser, we sort out the plumber and the thing, but the geyser only gets replaced the following day. But then that client had to go to another, the claims department and start the whole process again. These days it's now seamless. Geyser gets replaced that Sunday night. Things are automated. We know what they're covered for, and we know what the excess is that they need to pay. And you create that convenience throughout the journey, not stop, start, stop, start. Because I think the insurance industry is quite guilty of that. Every time you start again and go through another call center, another person that's got no clue what you're talking about, because he didn't deal with you, and there was no system that can actually show that he spoke to that call center agent, and that was the information that was captured. So we need to streamline that, and that's where technology plays a vital role, and all these and experiences that we built up. And then, last of the empathy acronym is when it's the why, and that why is about building the yields for your when you build relationship on empathy, trust, and personalized services, the benefit comes back to you, as an insurer, as a company that provide these services, and they stay and they refer people to you. So that's the type of thing that I always hammer quite hard on empathy, but it's a hard, it's not a soft skill. It's actually quite a hard skill, because you need to embed it in all your touch points, all your processes, and all your technology. We can't. I think in the future, probably in 15 years, with super intelligence, there will be something close to empathy on computers, but it won't be there. Humans like to interact with humans. We've seen it after COVID. Suddenly now people start, we were talking in this medium to each other, and now we focus on the we want to interact. We want to see a person. That's we're part of that mammal tribe of social. We're a social mammal. We need to have that. And you must give people access to a human, because they want to hear that. When you go through a risk event, I always teach my call center agent, you become a placeholder, an interim placeholder for that person's stress and anxieties and negative experience for that moment. But it doesn't stop there. people forget that when you go through a motor car accident, it was a severe one, you actually suffer from PTSD. So in the process, you need to follow up with that client. And that's also something that's very, very important. In 3 months, 6 months, phone that or interact with that client and say, do you need help with mental health issues? And that's quite amazing how you can build another form of loyalty or support around that specific client, because you show that you care. And that's where the blueprint of empathy as an acronym plays a big role in our organization, but I think it needs to play a big role in the insurance industry as well. Okay, I think I've talked too much now.
Brilliant, Wimpie. I specifically like you. I specifically like when you mentioned the placeholder for your clients' emotions and stress. Yeah, I think it's spot on. Yeah, thank you so much. A very good positioning there. That brings me to our third participant on here, and I specifically, Mark Baker is not an insurance person, and he's not a technical type of person. Mark Baker is an organizational psychologist. He deals with the emotional side within organizations. And the interesting thing is he uses a tech platform to do that and to get that right. And I think, Wimpie, as you mentioned, that absolute important role that the staff member plays in that interaction, sort of almost absorbing the client's stress and emotions and monitoring it and following it to try and guide that person and to make them feel that there's empathy and somebody listening in this whole process where hard tech is so much used and so essential. So I asked Mark to participate to give us a little bit the sort of a view as to how do we get to a point where our staff are able to do that and are able to understand the emotional side of this. And that means that we have to grow the staff's emotional intelligence, not just provide them with really good tech. And yeah, so Mark, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us and to spend time with all these insurance technical people, but we look forward to your contribution.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony. It's always an interesting sensation, Wimpie, when you get introduced as in an insurance forum, as Mark is not an insurance person and he's not a technical person. And yet this is a tech fest for insurance with cover, you know, it's very interesting. And I must say, Graham and Wimpie, I don't know what Tony thought was needed by bringing a psychologist in, because listening to the two of you, it is just so clear in your minds the importance of humanizing the interaction with clients. So I prepared a few thoughts for this, but I really just want to change tack and really just ride on the back of what Graham and Wimpie have been saying, because I think it's really just such quality that these two, obviously titans in the field. It was quite funny for me when, you know, Wimpie was like, no, Graham, how long have you been there? And I was expecting Graham to say 103 years, you know, and then Wimpie, you know, but guys, this has been a long time, a quarter of a decade. It's half a decade, half a century between the two of you of experience. And that's not only the people on the call. And so I'm just mindful that I'm speaking to people that already understand that you are actually selling to humans. And so what I'd love to do is just to make a few observations, Tony, from my perspective, which is void of understanding the technicalities of the insurance industry and very much entrenched in the technicalities of emotional intelligence and how to infuse emotional intelligence into every layer of the organization. And so, Wimpie, I just want to actually start with your acronym. I was quite worried when, you know, someone with so much experience and having stalked you on LinkedIn, you started with an acronym. I was like, nee man, here comes a very interesting set of sharing, you know. But as you talk through each one of these, I mean, things like mindfulness, things like personalization, things like acknowledgement, trust, humanity. The question we need to ask ourselves is not, are these things important? Because Wimpie, I could just feel it on the chat pane, everyone just going, yes, yes, yes. The question is, how do we infuse that? How do we actually live that out? And what I want to put to you is that there are two technologies that are coming together. The one technology is what we would all agree is the tech side of it. It is the digital, in the title of this session, the humanizing digital engagement. It is AI. It is how do we access people? It is how do we automate more and more of, I think of the previous Graham, talking about the 4 stages of self-driven vehicles and how we can kind of map that onto where the insurance industry is going. And so there is that technology that we need to take into account. But there is another technology that I think we are going to miss something in this conversation if we don't think of it as a technology. And it is the technology of the neuroscience of the brain. And when it comes to infusing things like you were talking about, Wimpie, mindfulness, personalization, acknowledgement, etc., into every layer of the business, unless we understand some of the neuroscience of empathy and of ultimately what my observation is the key hurdle we need to overcome, which is trust, I think we're going to be missing something. And so I want to make some observations about that. If I think about some of the technologies that have started infusing our life, and you can plot a little bit of a timeline. I'm going to do a hop, skip, and a jump. But if you think of when the personal computers started infusing people's lives, when IBM was in a big room in a big organization, no one had a personal computer. Well, what happened is that Steve Jobs came in through Apple, and they tried to humanize a computer. And all of you will remember it. He was crazy about the computer just saying hello, just acknowledging the humanity of a person. And then it was font. It was saying, well, humans want to have just options in font. And so I think we could look at Apple and say that Apple did a good job infusing empathy and the human experience into computers. I think we could say a similar thing of Uber and Airbnb, where they have needed to overcome this trust barrier. How do I get into a stranger's car? How do I send my teenage child to school in a stranger's car? And what they've needed to do in the UX, now this is not fonts that they have, this is not greeting you, but this is in the user experience. How do I click on something, a ride arrives with a stranger, and I get into the car? Well, I let my teenager go to school in that car. So there's something that's happened in the UX and in the safety features around Uber and Airbnb, I would argue the same, where a stranger comes into your house or you go into a stranger's house, where they've managed to overcome these trust barriers. And so I would put it to us that I think there is something deeper in the dynamics of trust that we need to think about from the user experience end to end that Wimpie was talking about, through to what is actually happening in the client's brain. And there's something interesting that's happened from an evolutionary perspective, and that is that our brains look for micro cues around whether we can trust the entity we're engaging with. If that's a human, we are trying to look for tone of voice. We're trying to look for dilated pupils, body language. If it is a tech product, we're looking for those things that Apple got so right. Does it have a human type experience to it? Does it give me options that feed into my experience as a person? Broadly, the UX, right? And so what I think we'll have to do is to have these micro cues of trust along the journey for the client that will give them the sense of, yes, I can trust this. Now, many of you, I'm sure, know that in psychology, there are essentially 3 layers of trust in an organization. There is an ability layer. Can you actually deliver the insurance that I'm being insured for? That would be in the in the ability layer of trust. And I think we would say, yes, for the most part, yes, you can actually insure this. So ability, I don't think, is where our struggle is in terms of insurance. But there are 2 other layers. The one is benevolence, and the other one is integrity. Benevolence, of course, is do you have my needs in consideration. And I think that's a struggle for insurance companies, because ultimately it is about making profit. So benevolence is where the struggle is. And then integrity. Is there going to be integrity that when I make that call, and it was interesting for me, Wimpie, you called it the moment of truth. Now, someone that's not involved in insurance won't know it as that. But it's interesting that you call it the moment of truth or the moment of integrity. Will you actually pay out? Or is there some fine print somewhere that I didn't read because the UX was bad and now you're not going to pay out? And so I would say that our fight, because we can't really win the benevolence one. Insurance can't pay us more. We can't make profits out of insurance companies. Everyone knows that. So no one's fighting for that benevolence layer of trust. I think our fight is for integrity. Can the journey across the whole chain that you were talking about, Wimpie, be one where we can trust the integrity of this particular insurance company? And it's going to require micro cues all along the way. Now, part of the thinking around this that I was thinking about is that how do we infuse this across not only the fonts that we use in the user experience, but into the number of buttons I need to click. I'm sure that you guys are working with some of the dynamics of digital fatigue. There is a decision fatigue that happens when people need to read too much, sign too many documents, make too many decisions. And I'm sure this is a huge problem in the insurance industry, where people ultimately will decide to not be insured because it's too exhausting to actually make the decision. And I don't yet trust that where my money is going to go is actually going to give me that insurance. So I'll go to, some other brand. And I think we might underestimate the emotional load that people have to carry in making these decisions. And so the way that we would do that is in the UX, we need to infuse emotional intelligence, literally in the UX designers that are putting together some of the platforms that we have. Even in some of the legal forms, how do we present the T's and C's in a way that has empathy infused into it? And I would put it to you that I think the answer lies somewhere in being able to develop the emotional intelligence of the humans that are actually building that whole value chain, Wimpie, that you were talking about from end to end. Many of you may not know, but empathy is in fact in the domain of emotional intelligence. It is an emotional intelligence competency. And so the muscles that we need to develop are EQ muscles. I want to just make one last observation, and then I'll hand back to you, Tony. And it's something that I think, Graham, you were initially touching on. You were saying, we might be worried that AI is coming in and going to take out all of our jobs, or so many jobs in the insurance sector. But actually that human, last percentage is never going to go away. And I would say more than that. Some of you may have heard of what, I think it's actually Mark Cuban. So he's not like doing huge research on this. He's just observing the world. But Mark Cuban has started talking about what he's coined the Milli Vanilli effect. Many of you will remember that band from the 80s or 90s. They were actually just fake. And people, there was this huge swing back to live music because people wanted to actually see, is the musician authentic? And what's being observed now is something of a Milli Vanilli effect, is that people don't know what is truth, Wimpie. What is the moment of truth? We don't know if it's the truth about Trump or about Israel or Palestine or the algorithm and what it's sending to us, or this insurance or that insurance. Are they going to screw me over in the last mile because of a T&C that I didn't get? And I think there is going to be a shift back, called the Milli Vanilli effect, where people, Graham, as you've said, are going to actually want to interact with a Graham or a Wimpie or somebody that I know can trust me. And I think, what stood out for Aiton in the chat pane, he reflected this from what the first Graham shared was, have you met my mother? I don't know if you remember him saying that. She wants only human-to-human engagement. Well, now, if I have a look at some of the generations that are coming up, guys, his mother, I would assume, is a boomer or a Gen X or whatever it is. But some of the Gen Zs and now the younger alphas and the betas, do you know that the alphas are going to be insured by you 3 years from now? technology is so infused into them that they are going to assume that I click one button and I am insured. And it's all linked to everything. And yet, there is going to be a new way of interacting with them where I think insurers are going to need to look at the spread of generations and the spread of individuals within those generations and make decisions about how to humanize the interactions with them. And I would put it to you that that's going to require emotional intelligence. Thanks so much, Tony.
Brilliant, Mark. Yeah, as I told you before, when you said to me, why are you inviting me to an insurance conference? This is why. So thank you very much for providing us with that input. I think it is highly underestimated, the value of building emotional intelligence in organizations. I know in my previous life, decades ago, I headed up the legal support and the training at a life company, and we spent 10% of our time on what we called soft skills training and 90% on technical training. And I'm not in that game. I haven't been for a very long time, so I don't know whether that has changed or whether companies still spend 90% on technical training and 10% on emotional intelligence or on soft skills training. But definitely that would need to change, and that would definitely need to probably weigh towards 30% soft skills, 40% soft skills, to be able to talk to this. We've got a few minutes so that we could ask questions. I didn't see any specific questions from the audience, so I'm going to sort of bring myself in as the questioner here, and I'm asking you, Wimpie, just based on what Mark has said about these micro points of trust and emotional and empathy, etc. From your perspective, because of the fact that you have such a vast ecosystem that you have to interact with, how do you do that? How do you bring some of that in to this process? You know, if I'm stranded next to the road and I press the 24-hour emergency button, how do you build in the trust that I have that, okay, somebody is coming?
Yeah, coming back to those experiences, and again, you learn from those experiences over time, because we've got so many cases. We do about 15,000 emergency cases a month, so you sit with quite a lot. And if there's, you know, every Monday I'm sitting in a status meeting and I look at compliments and complaints, and I'll get quite angry if there's you know, more than 5 complaints. And normally it's a plumber that dripped oil or fell through a roof and someone's, you know, replacing a geyser or step. So those things are that, but you try to avoid those type of complaints happening. So every complaint gets taken, and we do a 360 what if, you know, how can we prevent these things from happening? And I think that's where you know, we're navigating these challenges with empathy. So everything, like a person standing next to a road and it is in the middle of nowhere, etc. Is that case manager, because we don't call them call center agents, they actually manage that specific emergency event, and is how we address it and then help the client with certain points to say, you know, are you safe? Must we send out a guard, you know, security guard to your destination, etc. And then also identify the closest service provider to that client. Yes, and you're not always going to get it 100%, but you strive for that 99.9% thing. But when you make a mistake, there's also a moment of opportunity. How you can improve your system, your platform, your training, and your services, or you discover there's a gap in your services, and that's where the whole thing about design thinking comes in. Is how to overcome those challenges, and that's very much how we as humans evolved over time. Is overcoming all these challenges as we apply our rational thinking and experiences to resolve it. And, we have to be realistic. There's not 100% world. Maybe one day when the computers have, AI has taken, or the super intelligence have taken over our our lives, then maybe we look totally different. But our reality is to focus on the reality and what we can do different at that moment. In the moment of truth is, why I've referred to it in insurance is, a client's customer journey is very much the time he's signed up, the contact when he signed up as a policyholder, and if there's ever a claim in that 12-month contract period, and then on renewal. So that's why I say insurance is very, very important, that you allow your underwriting, everything must be strive for that perfectionism. When that moment of truth happen, that all the things to actually get that payment, to be made, the claim to be approved, you have all the information, because I think that's where sometimes it delays claims. Yes, and technology can also help with the whole fraudulent thing, and that experience, and it will evolve much better as well. The tone of voice on the recording when I phoned into the claims department, certain words that have been used, that data will one day be very, very efficient. Well, they're already using it now to eliminate those type of things. Because some people do see insurance as an ATM machine and not a protection machine. So it's just to address all those. And the other word is, that we also very cautious of is that entitlement. The people do hit you with a form of entitlement, and that's where you need to manage that as well, because all the different generations from, where I'm from, Gen X to Gen Z and the millennials, and now we're going into the Gen Alphas. They've got different perceptions and ideas about what the world must look like as well, and it's to address all those type of things. That's where I've just, that's why I use the acronym for empathy, because even in my call center, I created the whole, use the word empathy. The focus of very much about that empathy, and understand what empathy is about, but is more applicable in the call center environment than the one I've just, went down. But it applies the same type of principles. Okay.
Yeah, Wimpie, thanks for that. Mark, maybe just in the last sort of 3 minutes, we spoke about trying to increase the focus on soft skills, etc. From your perspective and with your business, do you see that organizations are actually talking about this and spending a little bit more time with this connection with technology and their staff and their clients?
Well, Tony, I can, just speaking from my perspective, we are in the same way that insurance is leveraging tech to drive efficiencies, we are leveraging tech to infuse emotional intelligence into the operations of businesses. And so what we are seeing is, and you made me think of this now, Wimpie, is that efficiency is not the same thing as connection. And I think clients are going to be left with something of an empathy gap that the staff in your company, Wimpie, or yours, Graham, or anyone listening in, that empathy gap is going to need to be filled. And the way to, an example would be what you were saying, Wimpie, if someone has a claim and they really are distressed, they've been in a car accident, and there's absolutely no empathy infused into the interaction with them, whether it's from the UX or from someone in a call center, that's going to leave a really bad taste in people's mouths. And I think that's going to start undermining the trust that they have in our brand. And so just to answer that question in the chat pane here, Kurt is asking, how do you infuse emotional intelligence into tech? I think this is a very good question, Kurt. What we are working at is how do we leverage tech to infuse emotional intelligence into the humans? And I would say that would start influencing the user experience, as I brought forward in that example of Apple. It would start having an impact on the way people would talk on phones. For example, if you've got a call center, Wimpie, and people are talking from scripts, which I'm assuming they would have to do. But if they're only talking from a script, there's a problem there, because there's not a human talking to a human. You may as well have an AI talking to them. So there's an empathy gap there, that if we can fill that intelligently by infusing emotional intelligence into the human, then it's not left up to Wimpie anymore to make the business full of the acronym of empathy. It's emotional intelligence that's seeping through the business. And I think that's how we actually are ultimately going to do it. And Kurt, that's how it will be infused into the tech.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. That was really insightful. Guys, thank you so much. I mean, it's a fascinating panel discussion. We could probably spend a lot more time on this, but I think the three of you summed it up for us very well, and it gave us a lot of food for thought. So thank you very much for your participation.